Welcome to my latest video series on leading in uncertainty. It's a sort of an FAQ where I try to answer typical questions that are being asked of me at the moment. This episode is going to look at how do you keep your team motivated when the goals keep shifting. As we all know, goals are a real motivator. It's actually quite hard to appreciate that goal setting was a theory that came out with Locke, I think in the 60s. And before that, we didn't really know goals were a motivator. But of course, now they're intrinsic to everything we do, whether it's schoolwork, whether it's communities and sport, or whether it's work. We know that having very clear and achievable goals that have a little bit of a stretch definitely motivate us. And of course, we're talking about motivation only individually. So what is it that we might need to do to stretch and grow and achieve more? But we're also talking about what might we do as a team. So what might be some goals that collectively as a group that might actually be really motivating for us? And the issue at the moment, of course, is that how do you have goals when the sand keeps shifting underneath you? So you might be doing this and you might be working on that at the moment. And then, of course, tomorrow, all of a sudden, you don't need to do that anymore. So it can be very demotivating if you're actually working hard on something and then suddenly the goalposts are shifting and you're having to do something totally different. So what do we do about this? Well, if there's anything that's quite certain at the moment, it's that we will definitely need to be very flexible in our goals in terms of moving forward. So that sense that we're actually going to be able to plan and we're going to be able to know exactly what we all need to do and what we all need to be accountable for is probably something that's actually belongs to the past. In an environment where things are constantly shifting and changing, then clearly we're going to need to be able to regroup, or the latest words are be agile or pivot more effectively. So there's all sorts of words that are coming into our vernacular at the moment that relate to that flexibility about being able to reorient what you're actually doing. So from a practical point of view, what sort of things might we need to be thinking about? Well, first of all, goals need to be iterative rather than fixed. So it's something around, okay, this is what we're doing at the moment. This is what we need. we need to do at the moment, but that actually might shift. So it's very much an iterative rather than a long-term view of that. We can have a long-term view of our purpose and vision. We're always going to need that. We're going to need the lighthouse, if you like, at the end. But the way in which we get there is probably going to shift quite dramatically as we move along towards that destination. So it means regular reviews. So depending on the workplace you have, that review could almost happen daily, but constantly looking at, are we spending our time and energy where we need to at the moment? It's that stuff around making sure that what's important is fully in focus. So those situations where we went off, we had our job description and we went off and we did what we needed to do and we were really clear about that. That's probably changing quite significantly, and we're needing to regroup a lot more around reviewing what needs to be done. And this relates to our research on resilience, which found that being resourceful needed that constant review of what strengths and resources do we have at the moment, and how do we best deploy those to deliver on what it is that's important right now. The other aspect that I think needs to fundamentally change is the way we talk about change itself. So a lot of the language is quite negative. We've talked a lot about change resistance and change fatigue and change management. If change is the constant, which we've been saying for years anyway, then really we need to be talking about it in quite a different way. It's not something that needs to be managed or even something that's linear. It's something that is change, because it's about adapting and being agile in a constantly moving environment, really. So if we're using language like, oh, well, that was a waste of time that I did that now, because now we're not doing that anymore, straight away, it gives a sense of wasting time rather than the iterative approach being what you need to get it right. So whatever you do at the moment is the right thing for now, and that actually grows, and you might learn from that whether it's the right thing that you need to continue to do. And so that's going to involve quite a different shift from people who, particularly those who need a lot of structure in their day around delivery, quite a lot of shift in the way they actually see that structure being interrupted, if you like. And of course, from a personality point of view, some of us need more structure than others. So some people will very, very quickly adapt to this agility and love the uncertainty, and they love the variety and constantly, challenging the status quo and doing things differently. And some of us will find that really difficult, and the rest of us will be somewhere in the middle. But if we start to change the way in which we're talking about these things, and we're constantly reviewing them with the belief that they're going to constantly evolve, then that's going to be a really good space to start in terms of that flexible headset around goals as well. So the other area that is interesting is that, we're talking about goals as being achievement of tasks, but we also have within a team growth goals that are around our own personal development. And even if what you've done so far is not going to be taken forward and your task goals seem to be quite disruptive, then what we're still able to do is we're still able to learn an awful lot about ourselves and an awful lot about our own teams in terms of growth. And I've spoken about this in another episode, but it's really useful to reflect on what has been my journey in terms of how I've responded to this adversity, and what is it that I would like to continue to grow on. And I'm reminded of a reflective exercise I've been doing with teams where people have been checking in on what have they been learning about themselves during this period that they want to take forward and offer to the team. What's the team itself learned about the way in which this team works that it can capture and take forward in terms of future team effectiveness? And what is it that they've learned about what they could be doing better with their communities and their stakeholders that they might want to take forward? And of course, we actually know from the research into teams that two aspects of what make an effective team directly relate to this, because two of the three are, is the team itself constantly evolving and getting better at what it does in terms of its processes, in terms of its dynamics, in terms of its outcome? And are the members within that team satisfied and growing? So in a way, if we capture these two growth goals, we're actually capturing two elements which create effective teams as well. So really good to be thinking about, if our actual task goals are shifting, how do we still capture the fact that we've really developed ourselves and as a team during this particular period? The other element of motivation that really sits at this point of time as well is that we actually know that appreciation is really important, because if you think about all the things that you might need to do to appreciate someone, for example, giving them some specific feedback, creating time for them, giving them particular reward, anything that at the moment you would do in terms of appreciation. We also know that all of that also lends to encouraging people, which is also a motivator. So again, even though the task goals might be shifting, the appreciation and the encouragement won't. And in fact, that is a beautiful way of not only motivating, but also continuing to develop that trust that we actually need to be developing as a leader. And of course, if we're looking at appreciation, we really need to be looking at how does that work in a remote world? For example, one of the motivators might be physical expression, a hand, slapping or hugging or whatever it might be. Of course, those aren't possible at the moment. So we need to adjust them a little bit remotely. But we also know appreciation is very, very individualized. And so what works for one person might not work with another. So having a think about, to what extent am I appreciating the members of my team in an individual way at the moment, which might also lend to motivation. So your check-in today then is around a number of things. It's around, in terms of goal setting, have you built in those processes that allow a constant review and iteration of your goals? So people in your team expect there's a review, expect that what's been set is not in stone and it's actually going to shift. Have you reoriented the way that you talk about the changes that happen when goals are reformulated? Is it done in a evolution, well, this is the way we do it way, or is it still being done in, well, that was a waste of time doing that way? Because that's quite critical in terms of whether people see that as a positive or a negative experience. And of course, making sure that you are supporting those who need a lot of structure and a lot of certainty, whilst making sure that that doesn't become the way in which you're managing the whole team, because a lot of people love that flexibility of goals and that unknown. And of course, how much are you also capitalizing on the growth goals at the moment and talking about what people individually and as a team are learning and growing and doing as a result of the situation, even though the tasks might be moving quite quickly. And finally, give yourself a little bit of a check-in on how much you've appreciated people this week and what that looked like, and whether or not that was individualized or whether it was a well done, guys, you've done a good job, which of course, as we know, doesn't pass the muster. Right, so what's in store? So next time I'm actually going to be talking a little bit about how we manage anxiety in our team, which is a key issue at the moment, of course. But until then, go well and stay resilient.